In the 16th century, in a world where questioning established truths was dangerous, there lived a man who dared to challenge the limits of human thought. He believed the universe was infinite, that God was present in all things, and that the freedom to think was humanity's greatest virtue. His name was Giordano Bruno, and his revolutionary ideas led him to a tragic fate, being burned alive by the Inquisition. This is the legacy of a genius who chose to die rather than renounce his convictions. Giordano Bruno was born as Filippo Bruno in 1548 in the small town of Nola in southern Italy. Surrounded by the volcanic hills of the Campania region, he grew up in a simple environment, but one rich with natural inspiration. From a young age, Bruno displayed an uncommon curiosity, captivated by the mysteries of the world around him. His thirst for knowledge drove him to seek answers that the traditional explanations of his time could not provide. At the age of 17, Filippo joined the Dominican convent in Naples, adopting the name Giordano in honor of one of his spiritual mentors. There, he gained access to the convent's vast library, filled with theological, philosophical, and scientific texts. Bruno devoured every page with enthusiasm, quickly distinguishing himself as an unrelenting questioner. When confronting established ideas, he posed bold questions about the nature of the universe and God's role in creation. To Bruno, the conventional view of a finite and hierarchical cosmos was insufficient to encompass the divine's immensity. This behavior soon caught the attention of his superiors. During convent discussions, Giordano didn't merely repeat doctrines. He pushed the boundaries by expanding the questions, challenging the limits of what was considered acceptable. His reading extended beyond texts sanctioned by the Church. He delved into forbidden works, such as those of Erasmus of Rotterdam and Nicholas of Cusa, which nurtured his vision of a God transcending human comprehension and a universe unconstrained by traditional boundaries. This desire to explore the unknown brought Bruno into direct conflict with Catholic orthodoxy. Tensions culminated when he was accused of heresy for questioning the Holy Trinity and rejecting the idolatry of saints. Rather than await inevitable punishment, Bruno made a bold decision. He fled the convent, abandoning monastic life to embark on a journey of self-discovery and intellectual pursuit. This act of rebellion was the first step in a long and perilous path that would make him a legendary figure in the history of thought. When Giordano Bruno left the Dominican convent, he began a journey that would not only shape his destiny, but also make him one of the most controversial thinkers of his time. For 16 years, he wandered through Europe, traveling to countries such as France, Switzerland, England, and Germany. Each city was a temporary refuge, but also an intellectual battlefield, where Bruno spread his ideas and faced hostility from those threatened by them. In Geneva, Bruno attempted to align with Calvinist reformers, but soon realized that the rigidity of the new doctrines was not much different from what he had left behind. It was in Paris, under the protection of King Henry III, that he began to gain notoriety. Fascinated by Bruno's brilliant oratory and daring thoughts, Henry offered him a position as a philosophy professor. During this period, Bruno wrote some of his most significant works, exploring themes such as the infinity of the universe and the multiplicity of worlds. The highlight of his wanderings occurred in England, where he found a more receptive environment for his ideas. There, he engaged in heated debates with other intellectuals, challenging both Aristotelians and defenders of Copernicus's heliocentric model. For Bruno, heliocentrism was only the beginning. He believed the universe was infinite, with countless stars like the sun, each surrounded by planets that could harbor life. This vision, recorded in his work Dell'infinito universo e mondi, was a direct affront to the religious and scientific ideas of his time. Bruno's interests extended beyond astronomy. He approached philosophy and spirituality in revolutionary ways. To him, God was not a distant, indifferent figure, but an immanent force present in every particle of the universe. In works like Spazio della Bestia Trionfante and La Scena delle Ceneri, he criticized religious dogmatism and exalted the individual pursuit of truth. Constant flight, however, took its toll. Despite his genius, Bruno was not a skilled diplomat. His defiant attitude often alienated potential allies and attracted powerful enemies. His insistence on disseminating forbidden ideas closed the doors of many academies and courts to him. Nevertheless, he continued to write and teach, driven by the conviction that truth could not be silenced. Eventually, Bruno was lured back to Italy by a treacherous promise of safety. In 1592, he was arrested by the Inquisition in Venice. Even during years of imprisonment, he remained steadfast in his beliefs. His journey through Europe had sown the seeds of a new way of thinking, a worldview that transcended the limits imposed by tradition and authority. Giordano Bruno was not just a fugitive seeking freedom. He was a pioneer who paved the way for ideas that would later be proven and celebrated. Despite persecution, his intellectual courage remained intact, proving that the quest for knowledge is, in itself, a form of resistance. The capture of Giordano Bruno in 1592 marked the beginning of one of the longest and most notorious trials in the history of the Inquisition. Imprisoned in Venice, Bruno was interrogated and accused of heresy due to his revolutionary ideas about the universe and the nature of God. Over the next 8 years, he was transferred to Rome, where he faced the Inquisition tribunal under charges that included denying the Holy Trinity, questioning Mary's virginity, and upholding the existence of countless inhabited worlds. During the interrogations, Bruno stood firm and unyielding. Unlike many who, faced with torture and fear, chose to renounce their beliefs, he refused to relent. For Bruno, the truth he sought transcended human judgment. He not only defended his ideas, but also confronted the inquisitors, exposing the rigidity and dogmatism that stifled the progress of thought. The tribunal offered Bruno multiple opportunities to recant. Each time, he reaffirmed his convictions. The infinity of the universe, the multiplicity of worlds, and the divine presence in all existence were concepts he would not abandon, even if it meant his condemnation. To the inquisitors, his refusal was seen as a direct challenge to the Church's authority. Records of the trial reveal the tension between Bruno and his accusers. In one of the final moments, when asked if he would renounce his ideas, he responded with words that became immortal. "Perhaps you pronounce this sentence with greater fear than I receive it." This declaration not only sealed his fate, but also solidified his legacy as a defender of freedom of thought. In 1600, after years of imprisonment and psychological torture, Giordano Bruno was declared guilty and sentenced to death by burning. The Church sought not only to eliminate a heretic, but also to send a clear message that no deviation from doctrine would be tolerated. However, Bruno's trial became more than a religious process. It symbolized the struggle between free thought and the forces seeking to suppress it. On the cold morning of February 17, 1600, Giordano Bruno was taken to the Campo dei Fiori, a bustling square in Rome. The gathered crowd stood in silence, witnessing the conclusion of a trial that had dragged on for years. To many, Bruno was a condemned heretic. To others, he was a man who chose to die for his convictions, rather than bow to the demands of an oppressive system. Bound to the stake, his tongue clamped by an iron gag to prevent him from speaking, Bruno faced his final moments with dignity. The flames rose quickly, consuming his body, but not his legacy. For the Church, this act was a demonstration of power, a warning to those who dared question its doctrines. Yet Bruno's sacrifice did not extinguish his ideas. Instead, it strengthened them, transforming him into a symbol and an enduring example of a free thinker. Giordano Bruno possessed intellectual and creative capacities that both impressed and often intimidated his contemporaries. His brilliant mind transcended the boundaries imposed by the conventions of his time, making him a truly unique figure in the history of human thought. One of Bruno's most remarkable characteristics was his exceptional memory. He not only studied deeply, but also developed advanced memorization techniques based on the principles of mnemonics, an ancient art that he elevated to new heights. Bruno authored treatises such as De Umbris Idearum and Ars Memoriae, in which he devised methods for organizing information visually and symbolically, creating systems that allowed for the retention of vast amounts of knowledge. These techniques were so impressive that he performed in European courts, demonstrating his abilities before kings and nobles. Beyond his memory, Bruno was a polymath of rare skill. He moved effortlessly through various fields of knowledge, including philosophy, theology, mathematics, astronomy, and literature. His ability to integrate ideas from different disciplines resulted in a comprehensive and deeply innovative worldview. He combined the teachings of Hermeticism with the scientific advancements of his time, creating a unique synthesis that bridged the gap between science and spirituality. Bruno also had a vivid imagination that fueled both his cosmological theories and his literary writing. He described the universe as a living organism, infinite in its expanse and filled with inhabited worlds. This vision was not merely scientific, but also poetic, reflecting his belief in the intrinsic connection between all things. His ability to express complex ideas through metaphors and vivid imagery made his writings not only philosophical works, but also artistic creations. More than 2 centuries after his death, in 1889, a bronze statue was erected at the site of his execution. Today, it stands as a silent testament to his courage and a reminder that ideas have the power to transcend time. Bruno's sacrifice was not in vain. He not only challenged the limitations of his time, but also paved the way for a future where science and philosophy could thrive without the chains of censorship. He reminds us that the courage to defend truth, even in the face of the greatest adversities, is what truly changes the world. Thank you for watching.